Lilamrita. We are in chapter 20. September 23rd, it was Radhashtami, the appearance day of Srimati Radharani, Lord Krishna's eternal consort. Prabhupada held his second initiation. Keith became Kirtanananda, Steve became Sattva Rupa, Bruce became Brahmananda, and Chuck became Achyutananda. It was another festive day with a fire sacrifice in Prabhupada's front room and a big feast. Prabhupada lived amid the drug culture in a neighborhood where the young people were almost desperately attempting to alter their consciousness, whether by drugs or by some other means, whatever was available. Prabhupada assured them that they could easily achieve the higher consciousness they desired by chanting Hare Krishna. It was inevitable that in explaining Krishna consciousness, he would make allusions to the drug experience, even if only to show that two were contrary paths. He was familiar already with Indian sadhus who took ganja and hashish on the plea of aiding their meditations. And even before he had left India, hippie tourist had become a familiar sight on the streets of Delhi. The hippies liked the India because of the cultural mystic and easy access to drugs. They would meet their Indian counterparts who assured them that taking hashish was spiritual, and then they would return to America and perpetrate their misconceptions of Indian spiritual culture. It was the way of life. The local head shops carried a full line of paraphernalia, marijuana, LSD, peyote, cocaine, and hard drugs like heroin and barbiturates were easily purchased on the streets and in the parks. Underground newspapers reported important news on the drug scene, featured a cartoon character named Captain High, and ran crossword puzzles that only a seasoned head could answer. Prabhupada had to teach that Krishna consciousness was beyond the reward LCD trip. Do you think taking LCD can produce ecstasy and higher consciousness? He once asked his storefront audience. Then just imagine a room full of LSD. Krishna consciousness is like that. People would regularly come in and ask Swamiji's disciples, "Do you get high from this?" And the devotees would answer, "Oh, yes, you can get high just by chanting. Why don't you try it?" Greg Scarf, Brahmananda's brother, had tried LSD, but he wanted higher consciousness, so he decided to try the chanting. Greg, I was 18. Everyone at the storefront had taken LSD, and I thought maybe I should too, because I wanted to feel like part of the crowd. So I asked the Umapati, "Hey, Umapati, do you think I should try LSD? Because I don't know what you guys are talking about." He said, "No. That's Swamiji said you did not need LSD. I never did take it, so I guess it was okay." I agree. Have you ever heard of LSD? It's a psychedelic drug that comes like a pill, and if you take it, you can get religious ecstasy. Do you think this can help my spiritual life? Prabhupada, you don't need to take anything from your spiritual life. Your spiritual life is already here. Had anyone else said such a thing, Hayagriva would never have agreed with him. But because Swamiji seemed so absolutely positive, therefore there was no question of not agreeing. Sattva Swarupa. Sattvarupa. I knew Swamiji was in a state of exalted consciousness, and I was hoping that somehow he could teach the process to me. In the privacy of his room, I asked him, "Is there spiritual advancement that you can make from which you won't fall back?" By his answer, yes, I was convinced that my own attempts to be spiritual on LSD only fall down later, could be replaced by total spiritual life such as Swamiji had. I could see he was convinced, and then I was convinced. Greg. LSD was like the spiritual drug of the times, and Swamiji was the only one who dared to speak against it, saying it was nonsense. I think that was the first battle he had to conquer in trying to promote his movement on the Lower East Side. Even those who came regularly to the storefront thought that LSD was good. Probably the most famous experiments with LSD in those days were by Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, Harvard psychology instructors who studied the effects of the drug, published their findings in professional journals, and advocated the use of LSD for self-realization and fulfillment. After being fired from Harvard, Timothy Leary went on to become a national priest of LSD and for some time ran an LSD commune in Millbrook, New York. When the members of the Millbrook commune heard about Swami on the Lower East Side, who led his followers in a chant that got you high, they began visiting the storefront. One night, a group of about 10 hippies from Millbrook came to Swamiji's kirtana. They all chanted not so much in worship of Krishna as to see what kind of high the chanting could produce. And after the lecture, a Millbrook leader asked about the drugs. Prabhupada replied that drugs were not necessary for spiritual life and that they could not produce spiritual consciousness, and that all drug induced religious visions were simply hallucinations. To realize God was not so easy or cheap that one could do it just by taking a pill or smoking. Chanting Hare Krishna, he explained, was purifying process to uncover one's pure consciousness. Taking drugs would increase the covering and bar one from self-realization. But have you ever taken LSD? The question now became a challenge. No, Prabhupada replied, I have never taken any of these drugs, not even cigarette or tea. If you haven't taken it, then how can you say what it is? The Millbrookers looked around, smiling. Two or three even burst out with laughter, and they snapped their fingers, thinking the Swamiji had been checkmated. I have not taken, Prabhupada replied regally from his dais. But my disciples have taken all these things, marijuana, LSD, many times, and they have given them all up. You can hear from them. Hayagriva, you can speak. And Hayagriva sat up a little, spoke out in his stentorian best. Well, no matter how you go on LSD, you eventually reach a peak. And you have to come back down, just like traveling into outer space in a rocket ship. Gave one of the Swamiji's familiar examples. Your space, your spacecraft can travel very far away from the Earth for thousands of miles day after day, but it cannot simply go on traveling and eventually it must land. On LSD, we experience going up, but we always have to come down again. That's not spiritual consciousness. When you actually attain spiritual or Krishna consciousness, you stay high because you go to Krishna. You don't have to come down. You can stay high forever. Prabhupada was sitting in his back room with Ayagriva and Umapati and other disciples. The evening meeting had just ended. The visitors from Millbrook had gone. Krishna consciousness is so nice. Swamiji, Umapati spoke up. You just get higher and higher. You don't come down. Prabhupada smiled. Yes, that's right. No more coming down, Umapati said, laughing, and others also began to laugh. Some clapped their hands, repeating, no more coming down. Their conversation inspired Hayagriva to Umapati to produce a new handbill. Stay high forever, no more coming down. Practice Krishna consciousness, expand your consciousness by practicing the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We can stop here. So as you see today, reading, I talk about on Radhastami, the appearance of Srimati Radharani. Srila Prabhupada held his second initiation ceremony where several of early disciples received spiritual names, and that day was celebrated with a fire, sacrifice, and feast. At the time, Prabhupada was preaching, in a strong drug culture environment where, young people sought, alter their consciousness through LSD and other drugs or substances. But he thought that true higher consciousness comes naturally through chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, not through the drugs. And he clearly explained, the drug experience were temporary, illusionary, and while the spiritual realization is permanent and purifying. And many seekers, including hippies, even the followers of LSD advocates, visited him to test whether this chanting produces high. Prabhupada firmly taught them spiritual needs spiritual life doesn't need any chemicals. The drug induced visions or hallucinations actually it blocks the self-realization. So Prabhupada said, his disciples testified from their experience that LSD gives temporary and Krishna consciousness give lasting spiritual state which never declines. So I think that's one of the Prabhupada's early challenge in New York was defeating the idea of these drugs and lead to spirituality. We can stop here.